Donald Trump in a war of words with the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. The U.S. president refuses to apologize for criticizing Pope Leo's opposition to the Iran conflict. He says the pontiff should stay out of American affairs. So, is this political interference or a moral duty to speak out? And what are the consequences? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fuli Batibo. Already fraught, the relationship between the United States and the Vatican is getting worse. It's a result of an unusual public exchange between President Donald Trump and Pope Leo. The leader of the Roman Catholic Church spoke out against the Iran war, drawing a backlash from the U.S. president. But Pope Leo has remained defiant, saying he will continue to condemn the war and that he isn't afraid of the Trump administration. Now, it's not the first time the White House has been on the receiving end of criticism from the Vatican. We'll discuss the consequences of this rift with our guests in just a moment. But first, this report by Imogen Kimber.
A war of words between Pope Leo, leader of the Roman Catholic Church, and Donald Trump, the US president. It seems to have started with these remarks.
This threat against the whole people of Iran. This is truly unacceptable. Certainly these are issues of international law, but moreover, a moral issue for the good of all the people.
The Pope was commenting about this post on social media. Trump hit back.
Pope Leo said things that are wrong. He was very much against what I'm doing with regard to Iran, and you cannot have a nuclear Iran. I think he's very weak on crime and other things, so I'm not. I mean, he went public.
And posted this image, widely interpreted as a depiction of himself as Jesus Christ. It sparked a backlash among Catholics. Trump maintained the AI-generated image was supposed to show him as a doctor, but unusually took down the post. The Iranian president condemned what he called an insult, and the Italian Prime Minister, who has close ties with Trump, called the remarks about the pontiff unacceptable. Pope Leo responded, saying he's not afraid of the Trump administration.
We're not looking to make foreign policy, as he calls it, with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe that the message of the gospel, blessed are the peacemakers, is a message that the world needs to hear today.
Before being elected, the American-born cardinal had shared posts on social media criticising the Trump administration, particularly its deportation campaign. His predecessor called Trump's immigration policies a disgrace, and other pontiffs have spoken out against former US president's policies. But this is the first public dispute. Trump previously said it was a great honour to have a pope from the United States, a sentiment it seems has changed. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guests now. From New York, we're joined by Cornel West, a philosopher, political activist, and former U.S. presidential candidate. He is also a professor and Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair at the Union Theological Seminary. Adolfo Franco is in Washington, D.C. He is a U.S. Republican strategist, foreign policy analyst, and former surrogate for Donald Trump's presidential campaigns. Also in New York, Christopher White, a Vatican journalist and author of the book Pope Leo XIV, Inside the Conclave and the Dawn of a New Papacy. A warm welcome to you all, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on Inside Story. Professor Cornel West, let me start with you. As a theologian, how do you view this row between the president and the Pope? Is this clash about religion versus politics or about ego versus principle?
No, I think it's far beyond ego. I think it has to do with a pope that is trying to keep alive the prophetic legacy of Christianity. Of course, for Catholics, it goes all the way back to 30 AD with St. Peter and then St. Linus. And it has to do with a president, Brother Trump, who is a sign and symptom of a society that is suffering from spiritual sickness, moral decrepitude, and political corruption, and thinks he can say and do anything and get away with it. So it's a very important juxtaposition and contrast and clash because there's a sense in which the Pope represents the prophetic element of both America, the American empire, and the American empire has already been complicitous with genocide in Gaza, and the president calling for genocide in very precious Iranian and Persian society and so on. But it's a crucial juxtaposition. We can really see the differences between those who are concerned about love and justice as opposed to those who are concerned about hatred and revenge. So Brother Trump, he's a slave to hatred. Brother Trump is a slave to revenge. Brother Trump is a slave to spectacle. It's a sad thing, but we need to see the juxtaposition in order to move on.
Adolfo Franco, your thoughts. Why was the president so offended by the Pope's remarks?
Well, that was a nice philosophical statement, but let me think a little bit about more of the facts, in my opinion. I think he's offended because this has been building for some time, including a 60 Minutes program that ran on Sunday with the three most liberal American cardinals that were really talking about policy issues. There was a cardinal, I'll get to the Pope here in a moment, Cardinal Tobin talking about the mask issue, which people differ greatly about ICE agents. And the Pope, I think, backtracked a bit when he said, which I appreciated the comments, when he said, I wasn't talking about foreign policy the way he would see it. The problem is it was specific about specific policies of the United States when he said that things shouldn't be done by simply a power that thinks it's omnipotent and that's able to do what it wants. The problem the president has is these comments, I think, cross a line. Since the professor mentioned the Bible, is when Christ said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, he was responding to a question regarding tax policy, and render unto God what is God's. Now, obviously, popes are always going to be talking about peace and peacemaking, and we want peace in the world. But this is very different since the 1970s, where popes have been, particularly this one, and Pope Francis, talking about specific policy, everything from climate change to immigration policies. These are governmental decisions. And I think the president, who's been under sharp attack, and there have been memes about him that are awful, not from the Pope, obviously, but from politicians who repost and post the most horrific things about the president, he's a human being. That creates a sharp reaction to any type of criticism.
Okay.
I did not hear the Pope condemn the atrocities in China about Muslims, organ transplants, the hanging of people in Iran. I think that would have been probably appropriate as well.
Okay, I'll have Professor West respond to that in just a moment. But Christopher, let me bring you into the conversation. Do these comments cross the line, as Adolfo says there? How unprecedented is this level of public hostility between a U.S. president and a pope, especially the first American pope?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Pope Leo didn't start this fight. I think what we've seen since the start of this war is the president and other administration officials trying to use religious language and religious justification for the war. And that's why Leo felt the need to respond and to make very clear that whatever language you want to try to use to justify this war, you can't do so under religious terms. It simply doesn't add up. And I think what we've seen over the last year since Pope Leo was elected was that, peace is what keeps him up at night. He began his papacy on May 8th of last year using the word peace 9 times in his opening address. I think this is the issue that motivates him more than any issue in the world. And to see the administration trying to wage war under using religious language, I think is a total affront to everything that he stands for. And that's why I think the Pope felt the need to speak out.
Okay, Professor West, your thoughts about what was said there, especially by Adolfo, when the Pope talks about the war contradicting the gospel. Is that a universal principle or selectively applied, as some of his critics have said?
Well, the Pope himself, of course, comes from the rich legacy of St. Augustine. And St. Augustine did have a notion of just war. He's right there in Africa at this very moment, trying to, in fact, express his solidarity with people who are suffering there. I think Brother Adolfo's right, though. I mean, the execution of innocent people in Iran and even the persecution of Christians there requires attention, but you have to be morally consistent. You have to be critical both of what's been going on